copy of existing materials. The second point would be carrots and sticks. Many intermediaries in the digital arena benefit from unique exemptions and limitations. The notice and takedown regime, the ability to shelter under the notice and takedown regime. You may function as a content sharing platform. You may benefit from an exemption as long as you comply with certain conditions. So if you benefit from the exemption, you should have some public duties, some social obligations. Enable people to download materials that were uploaded under the shelter of an exemption. I think the third and last element is a strong emphasis, major investments in public provision of infrastructures and institutions that do social remembering and cultural preservation. I think in Israel, at least some of us believe that education should be provided by the country, health should be provided by the country. Social remembering is no different than health and education. The market should play, but along with some strong involvement of public provision. I'll stop here. Thank you.
So if the Dean of the Law School will permit, can we take 10 minutes for questions? Okay, great. So let's see if we have any questions. The IT folks have requested that for recording purposes, you come up to ask your question, or maybe you can ask it and I will repeat it from here. Is that okay? All right. If you're not comfortable coming up, I can repeat the question for recording purposes. I have a question to my left.
Yes, my question is addressed mainly to Professor Antonis. In your opinion, do you suggest the universities to prepare a code of best practices? And if so, or leave it to the court to decide? Or if you do suggest for the universities to prepare the code of best practices in fair use, how do you suggest to avoid the ceiling effect?
So the question for recording purposes is directed to Professor Cruz, and the question is whether he would recommend that universities prepare a code of best practices in order to avoid the ceiling effect that we find from the international system. For purposes of time, I may take 2 or 3 questions first, have the panelists respond, and then if we have time, take another 2 or 3. I saw another hand to my left. A little louder, I can't even hear you. So the question, again, for recording purposes, is directed at Till Kreutzer, and the question is whether he's overlooked or what is the role of the public users in the licensing practices of big social media like Facebook, I myself am not on Facebook, so I can't think of any other examples but Facebook. So Facebook and whatever else is out there. And the example, of course, being that when there has been a change in the terms of use, there's been resistance by users many times, or sometimes that have also resulted in them pulling back from that shift. So what's the role of users, especially in the big social platforms, in changing the picture you present? A third question goes to the dean, sorry.
This is just a follow-up on the previous question, and that is not just the pressure by consumers, but you talk about the bias of these licenses. But the question is, how do you fit in piracy, making available public domain works or alternative works to those that are made available under these restrictive licenses? So in academic settings, for instance, you can refer, you can use works that are subject to restrictive licenses that are subject to the licenses that are addressing institutions, the libraries, the universities. But then you can also refer, your students, for instance, in public universities, to those academic works that are posted online or to the website of the scholars. So the question is whether by just the fact that there all are alternatives, wouldn't you say that those alternatives would create some pressure on publishers to give up some of these restricted licenses because they would just make no sense commercially?
Okay. So there is actually a mic that should have been fixed on one of you, or you can speak from. The IT managers have instructed, they really need you to speak into that or come to the podium to respond to your questions.
Okay. I think this microphone is for purposes of the recording, and I'm not sure if it's actually coming through the
Is it-
speaker.
is it on?
Right into it, right here. All right, so 2 microphones. All right. So I will answer in stereo. There we go. Hello. Now.
Is it on?
There we go. I'm going to respond specifically to the first question, and I know our time is tight. Code of best practices, very important conceptualization of how to articulate a proper set of lawful behaviors. How's that? In another context, we might have talked about making institutional university policy on some issue. In another context, we talked for many years about guidelines as an interpretation. Whatever the current thinking is, my answer has generally been yes in response to your question. I do think it is good. I do think it's important for institutions, universities are the ones I work with most often, to really be proactive in understanding what the law allows and finding a useful way to express that in order to capture what is allowed for a variety of reasons. The most obvious, of course, is to facilitate the beneficial use of copyrighted works as the law does allow in the education and other kinds of environments. And another reason is so that we're better equipped as citizens to understand what we already have, so that as we move into some of the other concerns that our other speakers have spoken to, the issues of licensing and so on, so that you know what you already have before you enter into that license agreement. A license agreement is restrictive only if you know that it's restrictive. You can only know that you're giving up rights if you know what rights you have to start with. So it is very important for many reasons to understand what you have. And if you articulate that in guidelines and policy and codes of best practice to help people through some of these challenges, I think that's all very important for an institution to do. And knowing the time, I'll defer to others.
Right, Till?
This is for the recording. Oh, there you go. I know, complicated. Here, allow me.
Thank God it fits. Fits to my students. Okay, as I understood your both questions right, they address the same aspect, or basically the same aspect. As I understood, the question is, has the market enough power to make the suppliers change restrictive terms? And the market is a different thing to look at. I think you have to differentiate basically between user groups. For example, public institutions on the one hand and private consumers on the other. When it comes to crowds and the power of the argument that can be distributed over Facebook, for example, the consumers can, put a lot of pressure on the vendors actually, and we saw that in the recently and in the past before, that the market power of the consumer in the whole environment can be very strong. We saw that, for example, concerning the copy protection measures of the music industry. They dropped that plan to implement copy protection measures because they had to learn, painfully actually, that they won't sell products that are available for free on the same medium when they in the same course when they also try to, or additionally try to restrict the user's rights or the possibilities to use your material. There's really the coincidence of illegal sources and legal sources in the user's realm and the consumer's realm is very relevant to the vendors and to the market because the users can choose. So there's some kind of competition between illegal sources and legal sources. They choose and actually they don't have to care about copyright infringement, stuff like that so much. So they do it anyway. When they're not allowed to do something, they do it anyway, as we see with copy protection measures. They are circumvented the first day after they were implemented for the first time. So you have your copying tool on the internet, and the consumer don't have to be that compliant with the law. But this is completely different to public institutions. On the one hand, public institutions have not such a lobby like the users have, and they cannot put so much pressure over social networks on the vendors, let's say on the publishers. This is one aspect, and the other is public institutions have to be compliant with the law. So they might not comply with every legal requirement, and this is a reality, we all know that, but you cannot make a strategy like, for example, we archive in the future DVDs and Blu-ray discs. We have to do that. We have we serve the public interest with that. This is our task to fulfill. They are all copy protected, but we don't care. So we circumvent. There are wonderful tools like any DVD in the world. So we use them to fulfill our public task, our public goal, to archive these things against the law. This is not possible. The user can do that, but not the public institution. And this is one reason I thought when you talked about these, how do you call them, corporate preservation institutions or similar. I thought about that before, that YouTube and user-generated content platforms so far they took over a long time ago as the most relevant preservation institutions because they are able either not to obey the law, like let's say file hosting services, or to allow other people not to obey the law. So it's a fact that all of, let's say, audiovisual content, most of it, is it's online nowadays, it's illegal. But those private, corporate archiving institutions do not have to care about that so much, so they took over. Instead, on the other hand, they are the public institution, and they have to comply with the law. So they have a real disadvantage against these private institutions. That's the answer.
And of course, the question of whether YouTube is legal or illegal is actually open for debate currently, not a foregone conclusion, and at least 100 law professors in the U.S. At least 100 law professors in the U.S. are hoping for a different outcome. Guy, did you want to make a comment at all? Okay. I think because of our time, actually, I want you to congratulate the panel. They were very obedient because we started a few minutes late, and we've been able to end just a few minutes after our allotted time. Let me just take the chair's prerogative to thank Till and Kenny and Guy for really, I think, stimulating presentations, to thank Neva and Lily and Elite and all the other organizers, our IT support, for helping us get through, I think, very successfully this first morning session. We will now proceed, I believe, to a coffee break. One that will be much more democratic than the privatization processes or the copyright lawmaking processes. I invite you to join us for a break, and we will begin the second panel at noon promptly.
Okay, welcome to our next session. My name is Tony Greenman, and the session is about facilitating access to digital works. I'm a lawyer, so it's a bit strange for me that I was invited to chair this session about facilitating access. I thought I was more suitable for impeding access, but anyway, so be it. As it is, I'm actually a copyright lawyer, but I'm also a teacher and an author and a publisher, and so I have a lot of internal conflicts on this subject of access to digital content. As a teacher at the university in Jerusalem, I put some of my writings up on the website for my students, and then as a publisher, I say to myself, hey, why did you do that? I invested a lot of money in printing and producing these books. And as an author, I say to myself, and I need to get some royalties because that's what I worked for. And then as a lawyer, I say, okay, let me take care of it. I'll sue the teacher. In the end, as a mediator, I sometimes say, well, we'll have to come to a compromise. Maybe we'll settle on copyright for half a lifetime and 35 years and royalties once every 2 years. And the conflict of allowing or facilitating access to digital or, for the same token, analog content on the one hand, and maintaining the incentive to create, on the other hand, is, I think, one of the major challenges before the copyright system today. And we have a wonderful panel here to speak about that subject. Before the panel starts, I'm just told that the IT people are working on clearing the clouds, and that should be done by this afternoon. So if you stick around, you will get the view. It does go all the way up the coast to Lebanon. Okay. Our first speaker today is Lucie Guibault from the Institute for Information Law at the University of Amsterdam, where she is assistant professor. And Lucie is going to talk about the subject of cross-border dissemination of mass digitized library collections. Lucie, thank you.
Thank you very much for this nice introduction. Good afternoon now, ladies and gentlemen. Following on the subjects of this morning, well, private ordering and contracts and copyright limitations is also a subject that is very dear to me. Been working on this subject for, well, quite a number of years already. But today, I would like to talk about something that's perhaps more practical and at least from European perspective more urgent, and that is indeed cross-border dissemination of mass digitized library collections. This is in the context of Europeana. Some of you may have heard of Europeana. Europeana is a European Union funded project, which is not Google, perhaps better than Google, because it is now the flagship of the European Union as the portal for access to cultural heritage material within Europe. And a lot of attention from politics and from decision makers in Europe is geared towards Europeana, and we want to make it a success. Now, what is Europeana? Europeana is actually a portal where all the participating cultural heritage institutions of Europe send their metadata that link back to the items that are preserved within these national institutions. And you can think at this stage there are 15 million items being made accessible on Europeana right now, and the intent is to let this collection grow and grow over the years. So as you see here, this is one search result of Europeana where I typed in the name of the author Ibsen, the Norwegian author, and these are some results that you find when you type in Ibsen. You will see it might be just big enough so that you see there are different types of objects in Europeana. You have texts and images and videos and sounds. And the idea is that when you do a search, you get the results of all the items preserved in all the national institutions that relate to that item. They're all put into context, and then you can look per item that interests you. You also see sometimes you have thumbnails and sometimes you don't. Now, that's all an issue of rights clearance. Here I chose one item that I would have liked to consult. It's held by the National Library of Norway. Here you have the metadata still in the Europeana environment, and the idea of Europeana would be ideally to give access to this item. When you click on the thumbnail, now you move to the local environment, and this is the site of the National Library of Norway. And if you can read Norwegian, and I can read 2 words thanks to Bernd Hugenholz, with whom I work, because he partly lives in Norway, I know that ikke in Norwegian means no. And no entry, yes. So, and no entry because this library book project gives access only to Norwegian IP addresses. Now, this is not the idea of Europeana. The idea of Europeana is when you click on an item that you at least can view and consult and access the works that are being repertoried, I don't know, put up within metadata, within Europeana. So cross-border dissemination of mass digitized library collections is a key issue for Europeana. And you see it, you have now a direct example of it. And the whole issue really is rights clearance. And it's a global issue. And I'm not only talking for Europeana here, because talking with Americans, there's a project that's being set up. It's a digitized Public Library of America project that the Berkman Center, together with other parties, are trying to set up. They also aim at giving global access to the works that they preserve and that they put in their collections. And I'm sure Israeli National Library is also busy with the digitization project. And knowing the Jewish population across the globe, I mean, it's of paramount importance, in my opinion, that access be given not only within the territory of Israel, but outside. So it's a global issue in terms of territory. So for Europeana, it's not only within the EU, but it's global. And it's also in terms of works, because we're not only talking about books or printed material within the context of Europeana, we're talking also about video, about images, about sound recordings, and, well, any kind of works that are being held within the collections of the participating institutions. And we're also talking about all in copyright material. We're not only talking about orphan works or out-of-print works, because a library doesn't want to first sieve out what's orphan to give access to the orphans and keep the in copyright. They want to give access to their collection. So, and what does that mean? That means that mass digitization cannot presuppose making a diligent search to know what's orphan and what's not. So we're talking really global issue in all meanings of the word. Possible solutions. Well, this issue has been keeping us at Europeana. Well, I should have mentioned that I'm also involved in Europeana, because one of the projects is Europeana Connect, and one of the working package is to deal with the licensing framework of Europeana. So I've been doing work since 2009 on these issues, and we're about to produce a study on cross-border licensing of Europeana material. But besides us, it also is an issue that keeps the European Commission very much busy. And we expect, well, in the coming few days, to hopefully, a draft proposal for a directive on orphan works from the European Union. So they've been promising it for at least a year and a half, and if it doesn't come today, then I'll start wondering which year they meant, but we'll see. Anyway, many solutions are put forward. One of them is to introduce an exception or limitation, probably for all non-commercial use made by a publicly accessible cultural institution, but that is very broad. So there's a lot of discussions on the breadth and the scope of this possible limitation. And then you also have to work out the details of this exception. And if you couple it with a requirement for payment of remuneration, and this is not so strange because libraries and other users of digitized material agree to pay a fee, because it just sounds reasonable that use that is made via the cultural heritage institutions would generate a certain remuneration for the rights holders. Well, then, if you talk remuneration, then you talk collective administration of rights, and it can take different forms. So either you can have a statutory license, which means that you give permission to anyone provided they paid a fee, and the fee would be paid or fixed by an organization of the government or otherwise. You can have a compulsory license, meaning that users have the permission, but they have to negotiate on the fee themselves. You can have also mandatory collective administration of rights, where the difference between these is very subtle sometimes. And the last option, and this is based on the Nordic model, Scandinavian model, this is extended collective licensing. And on this option, we have been doing more work. And I shall tell you right now what the characteristics are of ECL. It's a form of collective management, of course, and it presupposes that the representative or the collective organization giving the license is representative. That means that it represents a substantial number of authors within for a particular type of use. So representativeness in question of number of represented members. It also presupposes that the law recognizes that agreements that are negotiated between the collecting society and users be made or extended, be made applicable to non-members. And this is why it's called extended collective licensing. The conditions of use of these agreements are based on free negotiations between the collecting society and the users. So, and this is different, and this is the positive advantage of extended collective licensing if you compare to statutory license or compulsory license, that the freedom of negotiation between the collective society and the users is a key element of ECL. Another key element of ECL is that non-members always have a right to opt out from this agreement. So imagine a non-member finds out that there's a collective agreement, ECL, on a certain type of use, can always show up and say, well, I want to be excluded from this deal, and please give me my money for the past use, and we'll be happy. Another right of the non-member is to receive individual remuneration, but that is provided that he can prove that there has been use of his work, and that he basically can prove the amount of licensing that he would have gotten had he negotiated himself. And the beauty of this also, compared to simply collective or other types of arrangement, is that it does create immunity against criminal sanctions for infringement. So extended collective licensing is a model that we are, at the Institute for Information Law, that we are favoring. Also, not only based on the Scandinavian model, but we do realize that in Germany, the WG Wort has something similar ongoing. The Koninklijke Bibliotheek in the Netherlands has also concluded a deal with Pictoright, which is the collective society for photographers and other rights owners on images. So in the practice, there are certain types of licensing arrangements that are being concluded that do pretend to have an effect on non-members, except that they lack, at least outside the Scandinavian countries, they lack the statutory support to declare these agreements applicable to non-members, meaning that they may always be liable for criminal infringement suits. So, which is not good, and that's why a statutory solution is needed. Now, in the discussions going on at the European level, the European Union doesn't seem to be an adherent of the extended collective licensing solution, perhaps because it is somewhat unknown. I mean, the Scandinavian model is only now in practice in Scandinavia, and other European countries are not very familiar with it. And what people fear or do not know, people won't adopt very easily. And also because there are conditions for a good running of an ECL system, mainly that, that the organization is representative, and that you have principles of good governance within the collective rights management society, and where there's a big trust in the collective societies in Scandinavia. This is not the case in many other countries in Europe. Well, members, and especially non-members, will not necessarily feel confident that their interests are best represented by the collective society. So one way perhaps to improve the situation would be to adopt a directive on the good governance of collecting society. And I think the European Union is also working on this issue. Now, but this is the collective rights management solution for mass digitization, because mass digitization cannot happen on individual licensing basis. But what do you do when you want to apply and give access on a cross-border basis? And this is where we're still thinking of solutions. One solution, of course, could be to adopt a uniform or a mandatory exception or limitation. But as we have seen by the speakers of the previous panel, this is politically very difficult, if not impossible. Certainly within Europe itself, but at the international level, I think it's almost impossible to think that we will have a new exception or limitation, especially not uniform across all countries. So the solution is not viable. Another solution would be to adopt IPR rules, international private law rules, but this actually does not provide sufficient level of legal certainty, because each country can decide which IPR rule it wants to apply. So there are two remaining options. One is the designation of one country where rights must be cleared. Well, you can think in one of the documents that leaked from the European Commission, they want to designate the country of first publication as the country where you need to clear the rights. Now, the problem is if you have an orphan photograph with no indication of provenance on it, how do you know which is the country of first publication? It's a criteria that may be very difficult to apply in practice. You can also perhaps designate the country of upload. If you have a national library, the National Library of Israel, for example, might upload the works on its own website and say, well, we've cleared the rights for Israel, so it should be cleared, it should be sufficient for legal use anywhere else in the world. So then you have also to figure out which fee should be paid. But that might be an option. And the last option is the reciprocal agreements between collective organization, following the model of I don't know if you are familiar, FP simulcasting model, which led to a decision from the European Commission, but it's this network of reciprocal agreements between collecting society that give each other the mandate to represent the rights of the sister collective licensing on their own territory. And this model allowed for a one-stop shop clearing of rights, meaning that one license collecting society was competent to give a worldwide license. So this, I think, might be a workable solution. There are, of course, many details to think about when implementing it, but it might be a solution. So this is where we are right now within the Europeana context, and I wanted to share this experience with you. It's slightly more practical than the previous panelists have talked about, but this is at least one problem with eBooks, or at least digitized book, that do call for a more immediate solution. And well, I'll be curious to hear if you have any questions or comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucie, for that very interesting talk. I find it kind of interesting that we are here talking about facilitating access to digital content, when I think that we have never had more access to digital content or non-digital content than we actually do today. Maybe in large part thanks to the pirates, maybe in large part musical, audio-visual content, and maybe to a lesser extent literary content. But I think that we're doing quite well, and the fact that that we're talking about the problem of access although we have so many more options today to find content, whether it's to find the content itself on the net or whether it's to find at least indexes where we can find the content in libraries, is really at least a tribute to the human a thirst for knowledge and for information. Knowledge has traditionally been a major source of knowledge has been libraries, and one of the subjects that, or the main subjects that come up in the discussion of digitization is libraries, and sometimes we're getting a bit, I think, how would I say, we're not differentiating so much between what we want libraries to be able to do and what we want the private market to be able to do. Our next speaker, Professor Michael Carroll, Professor of Law and Director of the Program on Information Justice and Intellectual Property at American University, Washington College of Law, is going to speak on the subject of the long view on ebook, taking the long view on ebook licensing, I believe in the context of libraries. The long view is something that we here in Israel sometimes have difficulty in taking, and so it should be a very interesting talk for us. Thank you.
And you can enter with a tab to the browser.
Can I see the?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great. It's at the risk of. Okay. How's that? Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay. Let's tighten this up. Okay, I am really excited to be here, and as a result, I'm going to speak quickly because I'm excited. So I need to start by thanking Neva and all of the organizers for this beautiful conference. As we've really been very well taken care of, very well fed, and just enjoying the visit. This is my first time in Israel, and really feel very welcome. And I want to just really thank everyone who's been, a lot of work has clearly gone into the organization of this conference. And as someone who directs a program, I understand what it's like to be on the other end. So I really appreciate all of the work and preparation that went into this conference. And I realize now that we've all been very welcome and things, but now there's a little bit of pressure, right? Because we've been asked to gather here on a mountaintop to consider the future of eBooks. And you know, traditionally people gather on a mountaintop often to seek wisdom